The movie starts 7 years after Cockney gambler Jake Green is finally released from prison. 2 years post-release, Jake and his brother Billy visit a prominent casino to reclaim the money owed to them by crime boss Dorothy Machu. Ignoring his bodyguard Paul's warnings, Jake joins Machu's private game. On the way up, he struggles with claustrophobia and hesitates to take the elevator, but the other bodyguards insist they must climb 20 floors, so he reluctantly gives in, fighting off a panic attack. Jake's first bet is a chip toss against another player, which he intentionally loses to manipulate Machu into feeling secure. He bets again with Machu and wins this time. With bags full of cash, Billy and Jake hurry to leave, but they are stopped by Zach, who warns them of danger and offers help, giving Jake his card. Deciding to take the stairs, Jake collapses before even making a step. As he falls, the card reveals the instruction: take the elevator. At the hospital, doctors find no cause for Jake's blackout initially, advising him to rest while waiting for blood test results. Billy heads home while Jake takes bodyguards for protection, but they are ambushed and shot upon arrival. Jake narrowly escapes by bending down to pick up a card that says, "Pick this up." As he attempts to flee in his car, the driver is shot, but Zach arrives just in time to rescue him and drive him away. The hitman, Sorter, is baffled by his failure to hit Jake, as he never misses. He speculates that someone must have tipped Jake off, but when he confronts Machu, he claims he missed due to having a bad feeling. Meanwhile, Zach takes Jake to meet his partner, Avi, who has somehow accessed Jake's medical records. The test results reveal that Jake has a rare blood disease that will lead to his death within 3 days. They offer Jake protection under 2 non-negotiable conditions. He must hand over all his money and comply with their requests, including answering any questions they have. They give him 3 hours to decide, but Jake walks away, believing they're trying to con him. The results from the hospital are the same, but Jake suspects Zach and Avi bribed the lab. He seeks a second opinion from his private doctor, who delivers the same grim prognosis. After threatening the doctor with a gun to ensure he's not being paid off, Jake realizes he has no choice. After withdrawing money from the bank, he returns to accept their deal. While driving, Avi explains they're loan sharks, and Jake's money will be what they lend out. After visiting their first client to drop off the cash, Avi presses Jake for details about his history with Machu. Jake recounts how Machu had 3 incompetent men, known as the 3 Eddies, who lost their card player before a big game. They called Jake, knowing he was skilled, but he hesitated because they threatened Billy's family. He had to agree to protect them. During the game, the other players insulted Jake and his mother, which pushed him to retaliate, sparking a gunfight. The power went out, the money vanished, and soon after, Jake's name was mentioned, leading to police questioning. To silence him, Machu's men threatened his niece, resulting in the accidental death of his sister-in-law while she tried to protect her daughter. Jake never informed the police that Machu organized the games, which led to his 7-year prison sentence. During his time behind bars, the Eddies upset Machu, resulting in him using them as concrete. After visiting several clients, Zach sends Jake to a motel for his safety. Meanwhile, Machu and Paul meet with crime kingpin Sam Gold, the ultimate figure that all other crime bosses aspire to emulate. However, Gold rarely meets visitors, so they speak with his advisor, Lily Walker, who agrees to broker a drug deal with Machu. She warns him that Gold dislikes publicity and doesn't offer second chances. Later, Jake gives Zach and Avi more money, and while playing chess with Avi, he shares details about his prison time. He had a choice between 14 years of regular time or 7 years of solitary confinement, and he chose solitary. His cell was sandwiched between those of a chess master and a conman, who, though they never spoke, were acutely aware of each other. They communicated through messages written in library books, teaching Jake their formula for winning any game. The 2 men plotted a prison break and promised to take Jake along, but when the time came, they vanished without a trace, leaving Jake behind. Upon his release 2 years later, Jake discovered that the 2 men had stolen all his money, leaving only a note that read, "You can only get smarter by playing a smarter opponent." He then began applying their formula at casinos, quickly amassing wealth. As days pass, Jake continues working, visiting clients and giving away his money. Although he's meant to threaten those who can't pay, he struggles to hurt innocent, desperate people. Meanwhile, Avi and Zach are chaining a wall to a truck, intending to pull it down and steal a safe behind it, that contains the drugs Matcha promised Lily. When Matcha finds out he's been robbed, he sends Paul to rectify the situation at any cost. Paul visits their rival, Triad Kingpin Lord John, who agrees to supply them with drugs on short notice, but at an exorbitant price. Jake, Zach, Avi, and their team head to the hotel for the exchange. They sneak into an adjacent room to drill a hole in the wall, injecting sleeping gas to incapacitate both Matcha's and John's men. They then steal the money and the drugs, staging it to appear as though Matcha robbed John and vice versa. Later, Jake receives a call from Billy, who warns him that Zach and Avi are so dangerous that even gold won't deal with them, advising Jake to get out while he can. Jake ignores the warning and returns to work, where he's expected to execute a terrified client. Instead, he attempts to shoot Avi but realizes the gun is empty just as Avi knocks him unconscious. Hours later, Jake regains consciousness in the motel and receives a call from Avi, who informs him that he has survived his third day and should get a checkup. After visiting with his niece and Billy, who leaves him a gun for protection, Jake heads to see his doctor, who confirms the initial diagnosis was incorrect and that Jake is perfectly fine. He tries to contact Avi for answers, but Avi tells him to be patient. Meanwhile, Paul has been gathering intel, and Jake's name has surfaced as being involved in the troubles facing Matcha's men. Matcha orders Paul to eliminate Jake. When Jake returns to the motel, Avi and Zach are waiting for him, warning him that Matcha's thugs are inside the room. Jake bolts, and the men pursue him, but he manages to evade them, especially when one thug accidentally shoots himself in the chaos. The remaining criminals discover the body and assume Jake is responsible for the shooting. Jake then visits Avi and Zach at their office, where they confront him about the fact that he hasn't been completely honest regarding his deal with the Eddies. They reveal that the three men had been waiting for Jake's release from prison to kill him because his actions led to their termination by Machu. To save his own skin, Jake had offered the Eddies a deal. He would give them 3% of any money they lent him each month. Initially, only one Eddie agreed, but when he saw that Jake was keeping his word, all three wanted in, now for 4%. In reality, Jake was paying each Eddie with the money from another Eddie, so he wasn't losing anything. Eventually, they ran out of money to lend and turned to Matcha for a loan, piquing his interest in Jake's mysterious financial backer. During this time, Matcha was enjoying dinner at a high-end restaurant when his henchman informed him that Jake had escaped. Sorter, who recognizes John's girlfriend disguised as a waitress, shoots her before pursuing her driver. However, he only manages to injure her, and as she dies, she retaliates by shooting off Matcha's finger amidst the chaos. Subsequently, Sorter is dispatched to Lord John's hideout to eliminate him and his crew. Back to Jake, he continues his conversation with Zach and Avi while they play golf on a rooftop. They explain that Sam Gold is a mythical figure who never truly exists. Instead, he embodies ego and greed, wielding power over those who invest in him. They advise Jake to redefine the rules governing what controls him. After their chat, Jake withdraws the remainder of his money from the bank and donates it all before sneaking into Matcha's bedroom. He apologizes to Matcha for conning him, acknowledges Matcha as the superior crime lord, and mentions that he's made a donation in Matcha's name before leaving. To confront his fears head-on, Jake takes the elevator, which becomes stuck on the 13th floor. Battling a panic attack, he engages in an internal dialogue where he ultimately rejects his ego, stepping out of the game as a liberated man. When the elevator resumes its descent, Jake arrives on the ground floor, where Machu awaits him with a gun. However, Jake remains at peace, calmly walking past Matcha, which infuriates him further, as he cannot comprehend how someone can be so fearless. Matcha breaks down in tears, realizing the depth of his humiliation. The next morning, Paul presents Matcha with local newspapers featuring his name prominently on the front page. Jake hadn't lied about the donation. Now, everyone believes that Matcha genuinely cares for the community. Matcha revels in the newfound recognition, but his elation is short-lived when Paul reveals that Jake possesses the powder and has been orchestrating the situation all along. Paul, Sorter, and the rest of Matcha's henchmen then pay a visit to Billy, who manages to hide his daughter in a cupboard as he senses that one of his bodyguards has turned traitor. Once Matcha's men find Billy, they start hurting him while asking about Jake and the powder, refusing to believe his claims of ignorance. Paul's methods escalate quickly, making Sorter uneasy, especially when they force the girl to come out of the cupboard after hearing her sob. Unable to harm a child, Sorter rejects his ego and begins to eliminate his fellow henchmen one by one, but ultimately ultimately makes a mistake and gets killed himself. Meanwhile, Matcha receives a visit from Lily, who brings him a wreath from Gold. Gold is unhappy to see Matcha's name in the newspapers because he dislikes publicity. Lily warns Matcha that his time is up and he won't get a second chance, which causes him to panic. Avi and Zach take Jake and the powder to Matcha's casino, where Avi finally beats Jake at chess and reveals that he and Zach were the men in the cells next to Jake's. They always wanted to take him with them, but Jake wasn't ready to accept the truth, suggesting they are just figments of his imagination. Unfortunately, there's no time for Jake to process this because the casino's bodyguards arrive to take him to Machu, who has the girl with him. After dropping the bags of powder on the floor, Jake reassures his niece that everything will be okay, infuriating Matcha because Jake shows no fear even with a gun aimed at the child. In humiliation, Matcha concludes that Jake can't hurt a dead man, so he puts the gun to his own head and pulls the trigger. Thanks for watching.